one of my most anticipated, if not my most anticipated game, is The Last of Us Part 2. I can't wait to see how Naughty Dog, tries to match the masterpiece that is Last of Us 1. But we may not be able to play it for quite some time. Now, it was debuted in PSX last year, so December 2016. Didn't show up at this year's E3. And we have an article here from Game Rant saying that The Last of Us 2 is not even in full production yet, which can mean a lot of different things. The question I have is not so much what are they working on, because we know what they're working on, but when can we expect The Last of Us 2 to actually come out? Obviously, 2018 is definitely out the window. Is 2019 also too early to expect it now? Is 2020 more the release date? We'll talk about what I think the release date might be later on in the video. So, in an interview with Daily Star, communications director Arne Meyer, they spoke at length about Uncharted's development and what comes next. But Meyer had to put the brakes on during the interview and say that The Last of Us 2 wasn't even at full production. They don't even know what's coming after Last of Us 2, because usually that stuff is happening when the game they're currently working on is running at full production. And since Naughty Dog, as they say, has always been a one-game studio, they said Uncharted: The Lost Legacy threw a wrench into Naughty Dog's process, taking what was initially supposed to be a standalone DLC project into its own standalone game. Now, I'm really looking forward to checking out that game. I'm going to finish up Uncharted 4 here this weekend, and then I can't wait to play The Lost Legacy when it comes out. But I'm really looking forward to The Last of Us 2. He goes on to say, so we can pretty much say that the whole studio will be focused on The Last of Us Part 2 once this is over. At some point, part of the team will try to figure out what's next and how that goes when The Last of Us 2 is in full production. But there's another interesting thing here. He says that even after they finish Uncharted: The Lost Legacy, even after it ships, The Last of Us 2 development may not even be running at full speed right away. He goes on to say, a lot of people went straight from The Last of Us, straight into Uncharted 4, straight into Lost Legacy, and those guys need a vacation. Well, that's a lot of years to go working on all these games without a vacation. So the question is, when do you guys expect this game to come out? When do I expect this game to come out? If you look back at Naughty Dog's current history, if you take it from the PS3 on, they're a game every 2-year studio. Uncharted 1 was 2007, Uncharted 2 was 2009, Uncharted 3 was 2011, Last of Us was 2013. And then you have kind of the bump in the road. Uncharted 4 was 2016, so that was a 3-year gap. Now you have this DLC turned into a full game that took about a year, maybe a little bit more. So that from 2016 to 2017. So Last of Us 2, is it going to be 2 years from the DLC or 3 years? So are we looking at 2019 for The Last of Us 2, or we're looking at 2020 for The Last of Us 2? And for a while now, I've been thinking that The Last of Us is going to mirror the first game in its release date and schedule. The Last of Us was the swan song for the PlayStation 3, right? And there's all these rumors about a PS5 circulating, and we know it's coming eventually. Even Sony themselves had said, yes, PS5 will happen at some point. Now, most people peg it at 2019, 2020. So I kind of feel, and I think it would be appropriate for Last of Us to kind of usher out the PS4. So I have a feeling The Last of Us will come out that summer, right before the PS5 comes out, whether that's 2019 or 2020. And I'm sitting here thinking, you know what? If they're not even going into really full production on Lost Legacy until later this year, then we may not see Last of Us 2 until 2020. Maybe that's when the next PlayStation comes out. I mean, you look at like Sony's schedule, Sony's release schedule. You have God of War next year, for sure. You have Spider-Man for sure. Detroit really doesn't have a date, at least not that I remember recalling at E3, and neither does Days Gone. So it's possible Sony releases, God of War and Spider-Man before the holidays next year. They save Detroit and they save Days Gone for 2019, and then 2020 you could have, the 1-2 punch of maybe Last of Us 2 and Death Stranding. I mean, that is a realistic probability there, because we know Sony doesn't like to release big games during the holidays anymore. They kind of spread out their releases during the the whole rest of the year instead of the holidays. So, I mean, are you okay with this game coming out in 2020 and being revealed in 2016? That is like essentially almost a 4-year gap. That is a long time to wait for the game. Personally, I want them to take as long as they possibly can. I want them to make The Last of Us 2 as good as it can possibly be, because that game has a lot to live up to. A lot of people consider The Last of Us maybe the best game ever made. I'm not going to go that far. I do think the game is a masterpiece and is one of the best games I've ever played, but there's a lot to live up to with that game. So if they need more time to create a special story, special locations, good set pieces, some great conversation and dialogue between Al and Joel and stuff like that, then please take as much time needed to get that game 100%. I don't care if it's 2019, I don't care if it's 2020, and quite frankly, I don't even care if it's 2021. Just make that game special and take as much time needed to just churn out another one of those masterpieces. So what do you guys think? If you had to peg right now, if you had to go to Vegas and put down your money on a release date, a release year for Last of Us 2, what are you putting your money on? You putting your money on 2019? Or are you putting your money on 2020? That's kind of the interesting thing here. 2019 or 2020? I think it's one of those 2 years. I'm just not necessarily sure which one yet, because we don't know of Sony's full release schedule, whether Detroit Become Humans coming out next year and Days Gone. I mean, we do know for sure God of War is coming out. And speaking of that, remember earlier this year, when I think Cory Balrog said that, God of War was playable from beginning to end, and he said that February of this year. People thought that meant that game was coming out this year. And it's not. It's not probably not coming out till March of next year. And that was a game that has been in development for a while. And here's Naughty Dog saying Last of Us 2 is not even in full production yet, and maybe won't even start up ramping into full production because a whole bunch of people at the studio haven't had a vacation, because they went right from Last of Us to Uncharted 4 right into the DLC, Lost Legacy. So that game realistically may not be coming out till 2020, and I would love to know your guys' thoughts about all that. Anyways, that's going to be the video. I should have another one coming up later talking about a couple other things, but I appreciate everybody taking their time out of their day to check this one out. You know what to do if you enjoyed it. I'll see everybody in the next video. Later.